In 1865, America ended slavery. Or did it? Hidden inside the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves, there's a tiny sentence most people never noticed. It says, slavery is illegal, except as punishment for crime. Those 5 words created a loophole. And 160 years later, that loophole has turned into a $7 billion industry. If you want to see where this story goes, hit subscribe right now. You won't believe what happens next. Let me show you something strange. Right now in America, there are buildings that look like prisons, sound like prisons, and hold people in cages like prisons. But they're not owned by the government. They're owned by companies. Regular companies with shareholders and profits, just like McDonald's or Walmart. These companies make money every single day that someone stays locked inside their walls. The biggest one is called CoreCivic. The second biggest is called GEO Group. Together, they made over $4 billion last year. $4 billion. From keeping humans in cages. But here's where it gets weird. How do you make money from a prison? Think about it. A normal prison costs money. You have to feed people, pay guards, keep the lights on. The government loses money running prisons. So how do these companies make billions? The answer is simple and terrifying. They cut costs. Let me tell you about a place called Turrisdale Turner Correctional Center in Tennessee. It's run by CoreCivic. In just 1 year, between 2022 and 2023, something went horribly wrong there. There were 196 assaults, 2 murders. 15 people died in what they called accidents. 90 incidents of sexual misconduct. Guards found 97 knives in a single month. The most dangerous prison in America. And it was run by a company trying to make a profit. How did this happen? The answer takes us back to that loophole in 1865. When slavery ended, the South had a problem. Their entire economy was built on free labor. Cotton didn't pick itself. Railroads didn't build themselves. So they came up with a plan. They created new laws called black codes. These laws made tiny things illegal. Things like not having a job or walking at night or standing around. Things that black people did every day just like everyone else. Suddenly, thousands of newly freed black Americans were arrested for these made-up crimes. And remember that loophole? Except as punishment for crime. They were sent back to plantations, back to railroad companies, back to mines. But now it was legal, because they were prisoners. The states didn't even have to pay to keep them locked up. They rented the prisoners to private companies. The companies could work them as hard as they wanted. Many died. Nobody cared. The companies paid rent to the state government. In Alabama, in 1898, 73% of the state's entire budget came from renting out prisoners. 73%. This was called convict leasing. It was slavery with a new name. And it lasted until 1928. Then something changed in the 1980s. President Reagan declared a war on drugs. Suddenly, America started arresting people at a rate never seen before. Mandatory minimum sentences meant people went to prison for decades. 3 strikes laws meant your third crime, even a small one, could lock you away for life. America's prison population exploded. State governments panicked. They didn't have room. They didn't have money. Building a new prison costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's when a company called Corrections Corporation of America showed up with an offer. Don't worry, they said. We'll build the prisons. We'll run them. We'll handle everything. Just pay us for each prisoner we hold. In 1984, they got their first contract. By 1990, there were 66 private prisons holding 7,000 people. By 2009, that number exploded to 129,000 people, an increase of 1,664%. But here's the really strange part. These companies didn't just sit around waiting for prisoners. They helped create the laws that put people in prison. There's an organization called ALEC. It stands for American Legislative Exchange Council. Politicians and corporations meet there in secret to write laws. In the early 1990s, CoreCivic was the corporate chairman of a LEC's Criminal Justice Task Force. They helped write the 3 strikes laws. They helped write the mandatory minimum sentences. They literally wrote the laws that filled their prisons. Drop a comment below if you think this should be illegal. Let's see how many people are paying attention. Want to know something even stranger? In 2009 in Arizona, a politician named Russell Pierce drafted an immigration law called SB 1070. It was one of the harshest immigration laws in American history. Police could stop anyone who looked illegal and demand their papers. The bill was written at a meeting in Washington, D.C. at a hotel. Russell Pierce was there. 36 politicians were there, and representatives from Corrections Corporation of America were there. They all sat in a room and wrote the law together. When the bill was introduced, it had 36 co-sponsors. That's an insane number. Most bills have 2 or 3. 2/3 of those politicians had either attended that hotel meeting or were ALEC members. The same week the bill was introduced, CCA hired a powerful new lobbyist in Arizona. The bill passed, almost word for word as they wrote it in that hotel room. And guess what happened next? Arizona needed more detention centers for all the immigrants they were arresting. CCA built them and made millions. But wait, it gets darker. Remember how I said these companies cut costs to make profit? Let me tell you exactly how they do it. At CoreCivic's prisons, they spend $41.61 per prisoner per day on operating costs. Sounds like a lot, right? But $27.05 of that goes to employee salaries. That leaves only $14.56 per day for everything else. Food, medical care, medicine, education, mental health treatment, everything that keeps a human being alive and healthy. $14.56 per day. The result is exactly what you'd expect. At the East Mississippi Correctional Facility run by GEO Group, the ACLU filed a lawsuit. They described the prison as hyper-violent, grotesquely filthy, and dangerous. They said prisoners were at grave risk of death and loss of limbs. Let me tell you about some real people. Terry Childress was beaten to death by his cellmate. The cellmate had asked to be transferred. He told guards he was going to hurt someone. They ignored him. Terry died. CoreCivic paid his family $135,000 to settle the lawsuit. Adrian Delk was beaten by 7 gang members for somewhere between 20 and 60 minutes. Guards watched. They didn't stop it. Adrian nearly died. CoreCivic paid him $120,000. Belinda Cockrell complained about pain for months. She had rectal cancer. Nobody diagnosed her. Nobody treated her. She died. CoreCivic paid her family $45,000. Since 2016, CoreCivic has paid over $4.4 million to settle complaints about mistreatment at just their Tennessee prisons. At least 22 people have died in cases that resulted in settlements. 22 families who will never see their loved ones again. But here's the thing that should terrify you. The government studied private prisons in 2016. The Department of Justice Inspector General wrote a report. They found that private prisons had more assaults per person than government prisons, more uses of force, more lockdowns, twice as many complaints about food, twice as many complaints about medical care, and more misuse of solitary confinement. They also found something shocking. Private prison companies were falsifying records. They were hiding thousands of hours when guard posts were empty. Nobody was watching the prisoners. They just erased it from the paperwork. At Truesdale Turner, the prison I mentioned earlier, they had a 188% turnover rate for guards. Think about that number. It means the average guard quit in less than 6 months. Some left after days. The prison was constantly staffed by brand new people who barely knew what they were doing. How does this happen? How do companies get away with this? Money. Between 2008 and 2014, CoreCivic spent $10.6 million lobbying the government about immigration. Almost all of that money targeted one specific committee, the House Appropriations Committee Homeland Security Subcommittee. The committee that decides how much money ICE gets. The committee that decides how many detention centers we need. In 2016, CoreCivic spent $249,000 on campaign contributions. GEO Group spent $1.2 million. In 2024, they spent even more. GEO Group spent $1.38 million. CoreCivic spent $1.77 million. And it works. After Donald Trump won the election in November 2024, something incredible happened. GEO Group's stock price jumped 41% in a single day. CoreCivic's stock jumped 29%. Investors knew what was coming. More arrests, more deportations. More prisoners, more profit. On January 20th, 2025, on his first day as president, Trump signed an executive order. It reversed a policy from President Biden that was trying to phase out private prisons. The door was open again, and both companies announced they had tens of thousands of empty beds ready to fill. But here's the really twisted part. Most of their growth isn't even coming from criminals anymore. It's coming from immigrants. Right now, 90% of people detained by ICE are held in private facilities. 90%. These aren't people convicted of crimes. They're waiting for immigration hearings. Some came here legally and their visa expired. Some crossed the border illegally. Some are asking for asylum. It doesn't matter. They're locked in cages owned by companies making billions. In 2022, ICE detention made up 30% of CoreCivic's revenue. That's $552 million. For GEO Group, it was 43% of their revenue, over $1 billion. From holding people who haven't been convicted of any crime. The Trump administration has announced plans for 80,000 to 100,000 IC detention beds. They've allocated $45 billion. GEO Group executives told investors they could fill 18,000 empty beds, generating $400 million in new revenue per year. CoreCivic said they have 30,000 beds ready. The CEO of CoreCivic, Damon Heininger, told investors in August 2025, "This is truly one of the most exciting periods in my career with the company." Exciting. He's excited about locking up more human beings. But wait, there's something even stranger, something that connects everything together, something hiding in plain sight that most people never notice. Remember those 5 words in the 13th Amendment? Except as punishment for crime. Legal scholars have studied this. They've gone back through the historical records, and they've discovered something disturbing. The 13th Amendment was supposed to end private slavery, not create government slavery. The people who wrote it specifically wanted to stop private people from owning other people. But that's exactly what private prisons are. They're private companies, holding people in captivity, using their labor, making profit from their bodies. Some lawyers are arguing that private prisons violate the 13th Amendment. There are cases going through courts right now. The argument is simple. The amendment ended private slavery and only allows the government to use prisoners for labor as punishment. It never authorized private companies to profit from human captivity. If they win, the entire $7 billion industry collapses overnight. But even if they lose, there's something you need to understand, something that makes this whole story even more disturbing. These companies don't just make money from holding people. They make money from getting more people arrested. These companies have contracts with the government, but buried inside those contracts is something almost nobody knows about, something that should make your blood run cold. They're called minimum occupancy clauses, or as some people call them, lock-up quotas. Here's how they work. When a state signs a contract with a private prison company, the contract says the state must keep the prison at least 80% to 100% full. If the prison isn't full enough, the state has to pay a fine. The state has to pay for empty beds. Let me say that again. If crime goes down, if a state successfully rehabilitates prisoners and fewer people need to be locked up, the state gets punished. They have to pay money to the prison company for beds they're not using. Roughly 75% of private prison contracts have these clauses. 3 out of every 4. Think about what this means. States have a financial incentive to arrest more people, to give longer sentences, to deny parole. Because if they don't keep those beds full, they lose money. In Colorado, they paid $2 million for empty beds. In Arizona, $3 million. In Ohio, nearly $3 million. That's taxpayer money, your money, going to companies because we didn't arrest enough people. This creates a terrifying feedback loop. Private prisons lobby for harsher laws. Those laws put more people in prison. The prisons get more money. They use that money to lobby for even harsher laws. And it never stops. But there's something even stranger, something that reveals just how deep this goes. Remember I told you these companies became something called REITs in 2013? REIT stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. It's a special tax status. Companies that own a lot of real estate can become REITs and avoid most corporate taxes. In 2017, GEO Group saved $43.6 million in taxes by being a REIT. $43.6 million. They didn't have to pay to the government. Money that could have gone to schools, roads, or hospitals. But here's the weird part. To be a REIT, you have to own the buildings. You can't just manage them. So these companies started buying prisons. They build prisons even when nobody has asked for them, just in case. In 2000, Corrections Corporation of America built a $45 million prison in Stewart County, Georgia. They didn't have a contract. They just built it, hoping Georgia would need it. Georgia said no. The prison sat empty. CCA's stock crashed to less than $1 per share. They almost went bankrupt. But they learned their lesson. Now they build carefully. They advertise their empty beds to any government that will listen. GEO Group currently has nearly 6,000 empty beds ready to fill. CoreCivic has over 30,000. They're waiting for the next crisis. The next war on drugs, the next immigration crackdown, the next moral panic that puts more bodies in their beds, and every single one of those bodies makes them money. But here's what keeps me up at night. What happens to the people inside? Studies have looked at this. They compared people who went to private prisons versus people who went to government prisons. Then they watched what happened after they got out. The studies found something disturbing. People who went to private prisons were more likely to commit crimes again. They were more likely to end up back in prison. In Minnesota, researchers found higher recidivism rates from private prisons. In Oklahoma, the same thing, a 4% increase. That might not sound like much, but Oklahoma calculated it cost taxpayers an extra $554,010 for every 1,000 prisoners released from private facilities. Why? Because private prisons spend less on education, less on job training, less on drug treatment, less on mental health care. Remember, they only have $14.56 per day for everything after paying guards. There's nothing left for programs that actually help people. Government prisons aren't perfect, but they at least try to rehabilitate people. They offer classes, trade skills, therapy, things that reduce crime when people get out. Private prisons don't care about what happens after release. They only care about today's profit. In fact, they benefit when people come back. More recidivism means more prisoners means more money. It's the most evil business model imaginable. You make money when people fail. Now let me tell you about the revolving door. This is where it gets really creepy. Michael Quinlan used to run the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He was the top government official in charge of all federal prisons in America. When he retired, he immediately got a job at CCA as executive vice president. The man who was supposed to regulate private prisons became an executive at a private prison company. Julie Wood ran ICE from 2006 to 2008. In 2018, she joined the board of GEO Group. Matthew Albence worked at ICE in various positions. In 2022, he joined GEO Group. Daniel Bible was Executive Associate Director at ICE. In 2024, he became Executive Vice President at GEO Group. Tom Homan was Acting Director of ICE under Trump's first term. When he left, he became a paid consultant for GEO Group. In 2024, Trump appointed him as border czar. The man in charge of immigration enforcement used to be paid by a company that makes billions from immigrant detention. And Pam Bondi. She was Attorney General of Florida. In 2019, she became a lobbyist for GEO Group. In 2024, Trump nominated her to be Attorney General of the United States. The nation's top law enforcement official used to lobby for private prisons. These aren't coincidences. This is how the system works. Government officials create policies that help private prisons. Then they get jobs at those companies. Then they use their government connections to get more contracts. Then new government officials do the same thing. It's legal corruption. And it's destroying lives. But wait, there's something even more disturbing. Something about the families. When someone goes to prison, their family suffers too. But in private prisons, the suffering is turned into profit. Phone calls cost 6 to 23 cents per minute, depending on the state. That might not sound like much, but think about it. A 15-minute phone call costs $3.45. If you want to talk to your dad every day for 15 minutes, that's over $100 per month. Most families of prisoners are poor. That's how the criminal justice system works in America. Rich people get good lawyers and don't go to prison. Poor people get public defenders and long sentences. So these families can't afford $100 per month for phone calls. The prison commissary is even worse. Basic items have massive markups. Families spend an average of $200 per month just to make sure their loved one has soap, shampoo, and decent food, because the food provided by the prison is terrible. Some families described it as an additional tax on being poor. The state takes your family member. Then a company extracts money from you just to talk to them or make sure they don't starve. It's poverty exploitation, and it's completely legal. If this makes you angry, let me know in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what we reveal next. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn. Because there's one group of people who suffer more than anyone else. And the numbers prove it. Black Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white Americans. 5 times. Even though studies show black and white Americans use drugs at similar rates, black Americans are far more likely to be arrested, convicted, and given longer sentences. Remember convict leasing? The system that started right after slavery ended? That system specifically targeted black people through the black codes. For the first time in American history, some states had more black prisoners than white prisoners. Sound familiar? The war on drugs in the 1980s did the same thing. Crack cocaine, used more in black communities, carried mandatory sentences 100 times harsher than powder cocaine, used more in white communities. Same drug, different form. Wildly different punishment. This wasn't an accident. One of President Nixon's top advisors, John Ehrlichman, admitted it years later. He said the Nixon campaign couldn't make it illegal to be black, but they could associate black people with drugs and then criminalize drugs heavily. Private prisons benefit from this racism. They didn't create it, but they profit from it, and they lobby to keep it going. The through line from slavery to convict leasing to private prisons isn't a metaphor. It's a direct connection. Same loophole, same exploitation, same people suffering. So what happens next? Where does this story end? Right now, in January 2026, the private prison industry is more powerful than ever. Trump's administration has promised the largest deportation operation in American history. ICE has $45 billion to spend on detention. GEO Group and CoreCivic are preparing to fill tens of thousands of empty beds. Their stock prices are at record highs. Their executives are telling investors this is the most exciting time in the company's history. They're making more money than ever before. But something else is happening too. Something that gives me hope. Universities are divesting. Columbia University in 2015 became the first private college to pull all investments from private prisons. The University of California system pulled out $25 million. Dozens of other schools followed. Major banks are backing away. In 2019, 8 major banks, including J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America, announced they would no longer finance private prison companies. Activists are fighting back. The ACLU is filing lawsuits. Grassroots organizations are blocking new prisons from being built. In Leavenworth, Kansas, the community sued to stop a private prison. In Newark, New Jersey, people protested until the plan was canceled. And those constitutional cases I mentioned, they're moving through the courts. Lawyers are arguing that private prisons violate the 13th Amendment, that the amendment was supposed to end private slavery, not authorize it as punishment. If they win, everything changes. $7 billion in value disappears overnight. 90,000 people get transferred to government facilities. The entire industry collapses. But even if they lose, there's something more important happening. People are waking up. They're learning the truth. They're asking the question that should have been asked 40 years ago. Should anyone make money from keeping humans in cages? Because that's what this is really about. Not efficiency, not costs, not public safety. It's about whether we as a society think it's okay to profit from human captivity. The evidence is overwhelming. Private prisons are more dangerous. They provide worse care. They don't save money. They lobby for harsher laws. They create incentives to imprison more people. They exploit families. They perpetuate racism. And they violate the basic principle that justice shouldn't be for sale. In Norway, they tried something different. They focus on rehabilitation instead of punishment. Their prisons look like college campuses. They treat people with dignity. They offer education and job training. The result? Norway has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. People get out and stay out. They become productive members of society. Crime goes down. Everyone benefits. America could do this. We could focus on actually reducing crime instead of making money from it. We could treat prisoners like humans who made mistakes instead of profit centers. But it would require shutting down an industry that spends millions of dollars every year, making sure we don't. Here's what I want you to remember. When you hear politicians talk about being tough on crime, ask yourself, who benefits? When you hear about mandatory minimums or 3 strikes laws, ask, who wrote this? When you hear about immigration crackdowns, ask, who profits? Follow the money. It always leads to the same place. Private prisons exist because of 5 words in the 13th Amendment. 5 words that created a loophole. 5 words that allowed slavery to continue in a new form. Except as punishment for crime, those 5 words have generated billions of dollars in profit. They've caused thousands of deaths. They've destroyed millions of families. They've perpetuated the same racial injustice that slavery created. And they're still there. In the Constitution, right now, as you watch this, the question is, what are we going to do about it? Because this isn't just history. This is happening today. Right now, 90,873 people are locked in private prisons. Right now, families are paying exorbitant fees just to talk to their loved ones. Right now, corporations are lobbying for laws that will put more people in cages. Right now, someone is making money from human suffering. And the truly terrifying part? Most people have no idea it's happening. Until now.